Welcome to S4 Carlisle's webinar on Publisher's Guide to Accessibility. I want to thank you all for coming today. My name is Charles Levy. I'm the Director of Publishing Solutions at S4 Carlisle. I've been with S4 for almost 2 years now, and I'm extremely excited to see our company grow. We're embracing new technologies, we're improving our new services, and it's the area of accessibility where this is becoming most apparent. In January of this year, S4 Carlisle announced that we received accreditation as a Benetech Global Certified Accessible Vendor, GCA. Benetech is a well-known nonprofit organization that empowers communities with software for social good, and then issues accreditation to those companies who produce Epubs that meet a full range of accessibility features required to support the needs of all readers, including those with disabilities and learning differences. It's the Benetech Global Certified Accessible Vendor Certification Program. It's the first ever third-party Epub certification program to verify ebook accessibility. All approved Epub conversion vendors have demonstrated success in consistently producing files that can conform to Benetech's GCA certification standard. Benetech endorses these vendors as experts in producing fully accessible Epubs. We here at S4 have embraced this technology. We are certified. Therefore, any publisher who is interested in this, we can fully take care of your needs. During the presentation, there's going to be a chat available. There's also a Q&A at the bottom of the screen that you should have access to. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can go ahead and write them there and I'll read them. And then afterwards, we'll also have a Q&A if you have questions as well. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Johnson, Director of Content Partnerships at Benetech. Michael is a veteran executive with almost 40 years of experience in the technology, publishing, and education markets. He has worked on digital database and content projects around the world. As the Director of Content Partnerships at Benetech, his role is to work directly with publishers, conversion houses, technology platforms, and educational institutions to help them understand and implement processes that allow for fully accessible content to get from authors all the way through to the end reader. Michael has a long-time relationship to standards, having sat through several ISO, NISO, BISG, and MARC standards committees throughout his career, and he has a deep background in the creation and distribution of content. So let me turn it over to Michael, and he can tell you what we're doing here.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm going to share my screen. And we should be all good there. If you can't see my screen, please let me know.
Yes.
So, good. Welcome everyone from pretty much around the world based on the attendee list, and it's exciting to see everybody. And I appreciate you sharing part of your day with us today. I'm going to go through in the presentation today and give you as the slide says, a publisher's guide to accessible content. This is sort of an accessibility 101 class, or maybe even in some circumstances, accessibility 090, just trying to meet the audience where they might be and help people move to whatever their next step happens to be. So I really want to thank S4 Carlisle, not just for their excellent work in becoming a GCA certified vendor, but also in the invitation to share some of this information with y'all today. So off we go. Oh, okay. So this is an overview of what we're going to be discussing very quickly. Why accessible? What's this all about? What are the reasons? What are the motivations for an organization to be involved in the accessible content process? I'll give you a few minutes on Benetech as an organization, a few minutes on the GCA Globally Certified Accessible Certified Title Program. We're going to talk a little bit about formats. I'm going to talk about the entire ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, I'm talking about everything that goes from the author submits a manuscript. This could be a British tea cozy. This could be a paper on global warming. This could be a romance novel, whatever the author is writing, contributing to a book, an anthology, a website, a journal, everywhere from that point where the author submits the manuscript all the way down to the reader having a successful and engaging reading experience and all the steps along the way. I'll give you a few takeaways that I might suggest you take away from this program. Then we'll do a summary and Q&A. And as Charles said, along the way, feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and Charles will be monitoring that, and we'll just work through it all together. So why accessible? Why should anybody care about accessibility, and what does this mean? So this is not a US presentation, but some of my examples will be rather US centric. And for that, I apologize, but it is where I live. So about why accessible. I usually talk about beers, babies, and echoes, right? So these are examples of activities that have happened around the American with Disabilities Act and similar laws around the world to ensure that there is access to people with a variety of different abilities and disabilities. So in the question of beers, back when we all used to be able to travel and go places, you'd go into a bar or be in a hotel lounge or someplace like that, and the television would be on, but of course, over the noise of the crowd, you couldn't hear it. So there's closed captioning on the bottom. So you can see what the reporter was saying, or what the score of the game was, or what was this news piece about, all of those kind of things. Even not being able to hear what was being broadcast, you still knew what was happening because of closed captioning. So closed captioning happened because of the American with Disabilities Act here in the States and other laws in other countries around the world. So because of this quote unquote accommodation for people who couldn't hear, we all benefit from that accessible change. The next one is about babies. So you have your baby in your pram or your baby stroller, and you're pushing the baby around, or those of us who used to be road warriors and spend 100+ days a year on the road with your rollerboard luggage. You can't go any place, in America anyway, where there aren't cuts in the curb, where there aren't ramps instead of or in addition to stairs, or other different structural changes that have been made to buildings, to streets, to roads, to convention centers that allow people with wheels, which would include people in wheelchairs, to more easily move about, right? So here's another accommodation required by law so that people in wheelchairs or on walkers who have other sorts of physical challenges can easily maneuver in buildings, on streets, et cetera, which all of us who do anything on wheels, whether you're a guy who's hauling inventory on a trolley or the UPS guy, whoever you are, rolling things along is now much easier because of ramps and curb cuts. And then the echoes part is any of the voice assist devices. It could be the Echo, it could be Siri, it could be any of these voice activated devices, all of which came from the need and the desire to engage people who had trouble, whatever sort of challenge it was, interacting with a computer in a normal way. So beers, babies, and echoes, you've got closed captioning, you've got curb cuts and ramps, you've got voice assisted devices. All of these were accommodations under the American with Disabilities Act or other similar national laws in other countries, which were set out because of accessibility needs, but benefit everyone. The next reason why you want to do an accessible file, because an accessible file is just a better file. So in a content-rich, fully accessible Epub file, you have all sorts of additional descriptive information built into the file itself, which allow for better navigation, which allow for better indexing and discovery at point of purchase on Amazon or by Google or what have you, things that are now in the file itself because you've done this accessibility work. And then the last bit there, redheads and lefties, right? So there are more blind people in the world than there are people in the world that have red hair, right? There are more people with dyslexia than people who are left-handed. This is a large group of people which is going underserved if you're creating content for your organizational website, for your retail store on the line, for your government agency, and certainly if you're a creator of publishing content, textbooks, any type of books really, or journal articles. That group of people represents an enormous part of Earth's population. And if you're not doing fully accessible content, you're basically severing that group's ability to interact with you, whether it's commerce, information, whatever it happens to be. So you don't want to leave out groups that are that large. So what are some other accessibility issues? So there's policy issues, right? So there are plenty of organizations around the world, from government entities to NGOs, to states, counties, cities, universities, school districts, whatever they happen to be, who are adding accessibility across the whole firm. So you're getting statements from large corporations, large governments, large NGOs saying, we are definitely going to do accessible first design. We're going to do it in our web design. We're going to do it in our product features, our manuals, our help screens. We're going to design these things so you don't need a mouse to do it. And you don't need to be able to have 20/20 vision to interact with us, right? Legal issues. So the most pressing ones are in the United States, where you have 508 and ADA compliance. These are around websites, contents, instructional, educational environments. Last year, the Sixth Circuit Federal Court made a ruling, we're not sure if it's going to stand up, that literacy itself was a human right. So if that holds up over time, and I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice, so don't misunderstand, but if literacy is a basic human right and you're creating content which all readers can read, then you're in violation of their rights. Duke University got sued over the summer. They will, I imagine, again, I'm not a lawyer, they will lose. They were sued by a blind student because they didn't provide accessible content for the courses. As far as I know, every university, government entity, or organization which has ever been sued over the issue of accessibility has lost, at least here in the United States. It's an on and off issue. Either your content is fully accessible, or your website is fully accessible, or your software is fully accessible, or it's not. In Europe, we had a development in 2019. The European Union passed the European Accessibility Act, which, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it states, I think, clearly that by 2025, which in publishing work process flow terms seems like it's 2 weeks from now, but in 2025, it would be illegal to create or distribute goods and services in the European Union that are not fully accessible. Now, each of the member nations will have their own interpretation. The United Kingdom, despite having left the EU, is also going to follow this, so I'm told. So policy issues, legal issues, there's also moral and ethical issues, which is why would you deny services or content or commerce to this group? And then there's the legal parts. So here's a few minutes about Benetech. Benetech's where I work. We're a charity. We're a 20-year-old nonprofit, and our focus is on using technology for the social good. Our founder had a strong technology background and a strong bent towards social justice. So he funded our beginning, and years. The largest program that we work on is the global literacy, and we take both global and literacy very seriously. So we have built a program called Bookshare, and I'm going to come into some more details about that in a minute. The underlying essence of what our global literacy work is about is making ebooks available to people with print disabilities. We have a sort of unofficial internal tagline called every book for every reader every day, and that really is our goal. We want to make sure that any reader anywhere in the world has at least the opportunity to get access to content that they can consume. So Bookshare, as I said, is our largest program. It was part of the beginning of Benetech 20 years ago. There are almost 1 million titles in our repository. So Bookshare is a unique setup in the sense that we have built this repository of titles, and people who are members of Bookshare who have proven that they have a print disability, so they have a certified print disability, they become members of Bookshare and they can receive access to these titles for free. We're protected under the Chafee Amendment to US copyright law, and we're also, by extension, part of the Marrakesh Treaty, which is in a large series of countries around the world. So there are 1 million titles in our repository. We have between 600 and 700,000 users in 80 or 90 countries around the world. We've done over now 15 million downloads since the program began. We're approaching 16 million there, and I have the user number at 500,000, which I should have updated. I apologize. We're a little over 600,000 now. The program was already growing rapidly, and then when COVID hit last year, when nobody could go anywhere and get anything, our usage numbers and our member numbers swelled appreciably because people were just trying to get the content wherever they could. So this is a huge program. So where do all these titles come from? So the titles come from 2 main streams. The first stream is publisher donations. Publishers all over the world sign their consent agreement with Bookshare, and they donate their EPUB files to us. We run a series of automated enhancements to the file. We don't pretend that we're making the file 100% fully accessible. We don't have the resources to do that, but we do take the EPUB file that the publisher sends to us and we add in accessible features when we can, as we can, through machine processes. One of those file formats is the DAISY format, and we return the DAISY books to the publishers for their use however they see it to be appropriate. The other process that we use to get titles in, if the publishers, for whatever their reasons, have not yet begun to contribute titles to Bookshare, we are allowed through that Chafee Amendment in US copyright law and by extension in the Marrakesh countries to buy a print copy of the book, split the spine, and scan pages. So we don't like doing this. We don't like doing it because it's expensive. It's very, very expensive. And we don't like doing it because it puts a subpar version of the book up there, but it's the only version that we can do. And we don't like doing it because we would much prefer to have the publisher send us a quality EPUB file, even if it's not fully accessible, to build it that way. So it's a combination. The overwhelming majority of the titles do come from publisher donations. And we sign new publishers, probably not every day, but regularly. We're adding new publishers and adding new titles. Well over 150,000 titles went into the collection last year. So 1 million seems like an impressive number, but the reality is there are 1 million new books published just in English every year. We've spent 20 years getting to 1 million, and last year over 1 million new titles were published. So we're pedaling as fast as we can, and we have really no hope of catching up, which doesn't stop us from trying because we're a mission-driven organization. So now we're going to talk about the GCA. Charles mentioned this program earlier. Globally Certified Accessible is a program unique to Benetech. We're the first international independent third-party program. There are other organizations which do certifications, certainly. Our program is not tied to any federal government or any publishers association or anything like that. We are a totally independent organization. And we also are doing certifications around the globe. We now have certified partners in 4 different countries on 3 different continents with new activity happening very regularly. We created this program because of Bookshare. We had publishers who either wanted to contribute or wanted to contribute more and better content, and they didn't know how. They weren't sure about how to go through the process to do born accessible titles. So at the point of when their workflow was complete and before a title was released out into the sales and distribution channels, even if the distribution is free off a website, that's when they just didn't understand how to get there. So this is primarily an educational process, but there's also a lot of technical and communication information as part of the GCA program. So we certify a publisher's workflow. We don't touch every single book from a publisher. We get a series of books from the publisher. We work through a series of reporting, remediation in a cycle until the publisher has, they have learned everything they need to learn to create born accessible titles in their regular workflow. And then they achieve certification and they get this stamp, which they get this really interesting stamp that we invented here. And they also get the metadata that they can put into their title when it goes into the distribution channel. So we're not touching every title, but we do touch single titles from a demonstration standpoint and an education standpoint, working with the publisher. There are 3 levels of the process. Simple, which is basically mystery, romance, novels, basically poetry, books of poetry, things like that, which are almost exclusively text. There's a moderate category where it's text with some images, but the images are not intricate or complicated. And so in there, you might have a biography that has some pictures of the subject of the biography itself or the subject's birthplace or things like that, which has adequate alt text descriptions. And then there's the complex level. So these are books like accounting books, which have tables nested inside of tables, or books on math or chemistry, anything that has, or art books, things with a lot of images, which require complex descriptions and the associated accessibility content. There are 2 scores in our process, which is another reason which makes ours a little bit different from anybody else who does this type of work. We use Wcag AA, 2.0 AA, as well as the Epub 1.0 accessibility standards. And those are out there. Anybody can view them, use them, run their own internal checks against those. But we also have the Born Accessible scorecard, which is internal and specific to Benetech. And the focus there is really on navigation, especially downloadable content. So we're particularly worried about things like linkage, where on the internet, if you link on something, if you just hit the back button in your browser, you go back to where you were. When you download a book, that's not the way it works. So you have to make sure that the user can easily navigate the book. Print page fidelity. So if there's a passage in the book that says, reference the chart on page 71, or if they're in an instructional setting and the professor says, let's focus on this issue in a chapter that begins on page 110, the user has to be able to go to print page 110, not the reflowable ebook page, which typically does not map well with the print page. So another component about all this is these are not separate files. You don't have your ebook file and then a separate Epub file which has accessibility in it. When you do this correctly, when you get certified, you have an Epub file that is the same ISBN or ISSN if you're doing serials, and the same prices, and they're just better Epubs. So they go through your regular sales and distribution channel, all the same regular data. You can also send Onyx data to describe the content if you like, and everything should just flow through the process. We have over a dozen partners that are already certified, both publishers and conversion vendors, like our host today, S4 Carlisle. And there are hundreds of titles available in our own bookstore, and I don't even know how many titles are available from, say, Vital Source as an example, one of the main e-textbook sellers in the world. They've got a lot of titles with accessibility in there, and they have great accessibility features built into the selection process. Amazon is even beginning to start showing some accessibility features. They're not making any noise, particularly about them being accessibility features, but you will see certain titles that were well done. You will see things on Amazon like text-to-speech enabled or screen reader friendly. These are accessibility details that even Amazon has begun to surface. So it is already happening out there. So here's just a bit on file formats. So whatever format or formats you're working in now, there is some form of accessibility that's possible. And I do want to say congratulations and thank you to anybody and anybody who's listening today and is trying to do whatever they can about accessibility. You can take a PDF file and make it more accessible, and S4 Carlisle can help you with that process. When you want to be fully accessible, Epub should be your end goal. So wherever you are, that's fine. Look, you take a part of the presentation today, that's already a sign and symbol that you have some interest in the topic. So that's great. Wherever you are, it's okay. You need to move along your journey, and your end goal should be a fully accessible Epub output workflow. And every step you take in this journey is important. First one, recognize that you have this issue to deal with. Next one, put a flag in the ground and say, here's what we're going to do. And one of your first action steps should be to reach out to Benetech and or S4 Carlisle for guidance on your path. We exist as a charity. S4 is not a charity, but they have very reasonable prices and excellent services. And we are here, all of us in the community are here to help you, wherever you are, to help you get to the next stage in your journey. So just put a flag in the ground, make a statement, make a commitment, find out where you are now, start moving forward. And the bit on formats is important. And Epub is particularly important because it is the most accessible format in the world. So I talked about ecosystem before. We're going to go through this to help you understand all the other parts. I'm sure everybody on the call is very well acquainted with and is expert in their own area of the ecosystem, whether with a publishing company or a distributor, a conversion house, a university, a library, wherever you are in there, you understand your piece of it, right? So I'm just going to walk through in super simple fashion all that happens, or most of all that happens, to get from that author stage all the way down to the successful reader stage. So the author submits a manuscript, right? I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, but we go through the process all the time, every day. So there's nothing new going on with accessible content creation. There are some different things, but there's nothing new. The author still submits the manuscript. The author picked a picture of the Eiffel Tower or the Aswan Dam or the Thames. Whatever reason the author picked that picture, the author should give you a description. This is a picture of the Eiffel Tower. right? And then the author should also describe, here's why I picked this picture, okay? This should become part of your normal process. The author already submits the manuscript. They've done their own fact checking, or they've done their own theory proving, or whatever it is they've happened to do to create this. They've solved the mystery, or they're looking to enlighten people about romance or poetry or whatever it happens to be. If there's visual content in the book, the author should include that when they submit the manuscript. Here's a picture of the Eiffel Tower, and then the why. Now, AI is getting to the point where if there's a picture of the Eiffel Tower in the work, AI can tell you that's the Eiffel Tower. I've been fed enough images of the Eiffel Tower that I, using machine learning and artificial intelligence, can tell you it's the Eiffel Tower. What the AI can't do properly is get in the mind of the author and explain why that picture of the Eiffel Tower is at this point in this book. And that's the author's responsibility. So you want to, as you go through this process, to have your authors include those things. Now, people will say, wait a minute, our authors aren't accessibility experts and they don't understand all descriptions and long descriptions and things like that. Well, that's true. Your authors probably don't understand InDesign either, or style sheets or any of that, but they can still write manuscripts. So if you treat it at that level, to have the author include a description of what the image is and a reason why they included the image, that's far enough, and then your people and your conversion vendors can take it to the next cycle. So then we go through the book design process, and this is something you all know is design, layout, etc. And then, so the book is quote unquote ready, and now we're going to go through the conversion cycle to get some output created. Often there's a print book path, there's a separate ebook path, maybe there's an audiobook path. More and more interesting things going on about automated audiobooks. That's a separate conversation, but I'm happy to have that time about what's going on with Amazon and Google around that. So once the book gets created digitally, there's the whole piece of how does it get to a user? So I might have an internal digital warehouse in my publishing house. I might store the content with my conversion vendor. I might have it at CoreSource or Amazon or who knows where I have it, right? But that's happening. And then there's the purchasing process. So the individual is going to purchase this from wherever they typically go to purchase their ebooks. Excuse me. The institution is going to go wherever it is they go to purchase their content. And then the usage. I'm an individual. I bought the book, I rented it, whatever I did, I borrowed it, whatever I did to it, I'm going to interact with it now. And then the institution has corresponding places, library, archival, research. Maybe it's on a syllabus because it's a textbook or some other curriculum material for a course. None of this is new to anybody. You've seen all these things wherever you are in the cycle. You know these things are going on. And I'm trying to drive home, there's many parts here. And also to let you know, there's nothing new going on in creating fully accessible EPUB files. There's some different ways to do these things, but all of these things happen the same way they always did. Right? So as we start to talk about what pieces and parts of all this should be good takeaways. We've got, I'm not even sure how, 75 people or something like that, 55, 75 people on this call. You're all coming from different places around the world, different places in your organization, different types of organizations. And so from all the stuff that we went through, basically I've taken a full day presentation and condensed it down. All the places we've gone through, what kind of takeaways could you hope for, or do I hope that you take away from this? So the first thing is, review what you heard today. Do these things make sense to you? Do you get my imaging, my discussion point that nothing new is happening here, just some of the things are happening a bit differently? You still have authors contributing content. You still have your responsibility to mentor and edit and form that content. You still want there to be a good end product. You're still going to, whether you sell it or give it away or distribute it, or you're an aggregator or whatever your position in the chain is, you're still going to do all those things. You're probably already doing it in ebooks. In fact, I gave a great number of these presentations in the years between 1999 and 2005, where the conversation was getting digital. And the conversation was born digital, where everybody had a print workflow, and then they were going through various steps and corrections and alternate paths to get to the point where there would be a print one and then a digital one. And then as we went through that transition, the whole publishing world went through that transition over 5 or 6 years, so that at the point of production, everything was born digital as well. So now we're going to have things born accessible. Your digital books will come out, they will be fully accessible. So review what you heard today. Ask questions, come to me, whatever you want to do. Find out who your chief accessibility officer is, right? It's very possible you don't have one. That's just a generic phrase that I use. Somebody in your organization either does this work or should be doing this work as a separate role or as a role as part of their organization. Just like people started doing a digital production specialist or rights specialist or whatever it happens to be, accessibility is already part of and will be an increasingly large part of how your organization functions. Whether you're a publishing creator, whether you're a nonprofit in the middle of the accessibility content stream of things, whether you're a university, a college professor, a researcher, a library, wherever you are, somebody in your operation should already have this role, not necessarily titled Chief Accessibility Officer, but the person who is interested in and aware of accessibility and what your organization can do about and around accessibility. So find out who it is. And you know what? If there's nobody there, you put your hand up. You volunteer to do it, right? Because your organization needs somebody to do it. And start thinking about Born Accessible, as I said earlier, like we used to think about Born Digital. This is a takeaway you should have. Nothing new is happening here. Authors are still submitting manuscripts. Publishing houses are still preparing those to be completed works. Conversion houses are still converting those things. Wholesalers, retailers, direct sellers, libraries, classrooms, still buying content. Nothing new, just things a little bit different. Also, a good takeaway here is you can learn more about universal design or inclusive design. You can just do a search and find those terms. There's also plenty of organizations out there that are involved in this. There's groups all over the place. There's the DAISY Consortium is an excellent source for this kind of information. There are groups around EPUB in higher ed, EPUB in K-12. There are universities who are participating in these various processes. There are universities who are rewriting their acquisition plans and policies and their subscription procurement policies to include language around, is all of your content third-party certified accessible? The most important takeaway is probably take any step forward. Decide by this date, we're going to be to this stage in the fully born accessible pathway, the journey, and it is a continued journey. And I don't do that for some wild metaphorical reason. It's an actual metaphor. And the reason this is a continued journey is the standards themselves continue to evolve. So accessibility is going to be a constant issue with us, just like read on any device is a constant issue with us, or international rights and permissions is the constant issue with us around trade programs and things like that. So accessibility is already a constant in the publishing and distribution world, and it will remain so. So every step you take, as long as it's a step forward, is a good step. Finally, and I mean this literally, reach out to me directly. michaelj@benetech.org. The email's in there. You can also reach out to Charles, I'm sure, or S4 Carlisle, I'm sure would also be glad to help you. There is a wealth of groups and a wealth of talent and information available to you. Stand on the shoulders of the people who've been at this since the early days. Stand on the shoulders of the universities and libraries and publishers who have already begun to make this an integral part of everything they do. Learn from what we're doing, ask questions, push us, and I ask you, please, please, please reach out to me directly. Please let me help you. All right, so in summary, there's a lot happening already, a lot. I mentioned that, in our own accessible bookstore, there's hundreds and hundreds of titles. There's more publishers being certified via GCA, which is not the only path. A publisher can do accessibility without being certified. That's fine too. That's another step on the journey. You want the third-party certification so that your buying public understands somebody who wasn't you looked at it and said it was okay. So you can learn a lot from what's happening already. And as I already mentioned, myself in particular, but there's other groups, and I can connect you to those groups of the people who are already doing this work, people who are already putting language in their procurement contracts about accessible content, publishers who are creating accessible content, conversion houses who are helping publishers create that content, university students and university as institutions, as well as retailers who are making this stuff happen right now. And you can build from all of that. Another summary point, and I can't say this often enough, it's the same EPUB output, just better. There are real market opportunities to sell this content. A significant part of the population, the world's population, has some sort of print disability challenge. And you should absolutely consider Benetech as a resource. We're not the only resource out there. There are plenty of other organizations. We would like to help you. If you have somebody more local to you geographically or more in your particular genre of publishing that you'd rather work with, that's fine too. What we want to have happen is we want people thinking about it and working on it. So anything that we can do. I just was in a NISO seminar. There were a series of accessibility being run by NISO. Very good panel. There's a lot going on in Europe, the European Union, and the across the European Union, where a group is forming now to discuss what are going to be the legal ramifications, what are the workflow ramifications. The Book Industry Study Group has a workflow group, and inside of their effort, accessibility is an issue. So there's lots of stuff out there. So that's the summary, basically. So now it's time for all y'all to do some work. So what sort of questions? We've got about, I don't know, 15, 18 minutes or so for questions. So fire away.
Michael, I got some people asking questions about time frame. They want to know, you talked about planting the flag, getting things started. If an organization or an institution is ready to go, all the services you mentioned, how soon are they ready to go? How soon do these things get put up?
So that's a question which depends on where the house is now. So the first thing is, what does your existing production workflow look like? So if your existing production workflow is creating EPUBs now, that's great. If you're not creating EPUBs now, then you should go to S4 Carlisle and have them help you in the creation workflow. The certification process, if that's the timing you're asking about, the certification process is relatively simple. You send a file into us. We get it back to you in 5 working days or less, and you get a report which explains to you what you did well and what you did poorly. And it's not just a big X that says go back and start over. We explain to you why what you did was not in compliance. We might even give you some sample code to how you could have done it in compliance, and we'll certainly give you best practices that we've seen over the years we've been doing this work. Then you remediate that file, and when the new file comes back to us, we go through the same cycle. So the first one, Charles, usually takes maybe 3, maybe 4 cycles, because the publisher and or the conversion partner is starting from 0. And so they're doing their best to understand, and they're doing these things and those things, and we send the reports to them. We also make ourselves available for conference calls if there's any questions. The second file usually only takes maybe 2 cycles, primarily because there may be something in the second file which was not in the first file. So now we've discovered, oh, here's a new element that you've added. That's great, but you're not doing it correctly. Here's the standards on that. And the third one usually goes through generally without a hitch. So this whole process, depending on how quickly the publisher themselves and the people working on the remediation get done, this whole thing could take 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. Some of them go sooner. We've had publishers go through as soon as 3 or 4 weeks. So that's really dependent on the house. I would encourage everybody when they plant that flag, don't plant a flag and say everything we have is going to be accessible, because you have a backlist of whatever size, and I would discourage you from doing that. I would encourage you to do the following. All our new titles starting from here are going to be fully accessible. Then we're going to take our evergreen titles, the ones that just sell and sell and sell and sell. We're going to go back and do those. And then we're going to react based on a particular title or author or client who wants us to handle this book or this subject matter and work through that way. Because going through and doing all this accessibility on all of your entire backlist is going to cut into your funding for doing it moving forward. And the moving forward part's more important. So that's a quick thing on timing.
Okay.
So.
All right, we have a question about how is WCAG 3.0 different from 2.1?
So 3.0 is just getting started. So there'll be the usual long globe-wide chat and conversation around, do we like the standard? What do we like in the standard? What about this part and subpart and all that? So that's kind of just headed out into that process. The main things in 3.0 as it relates to accessibility that vary are, there's a much higher focus on content which is not web only. So some of the things I talked about, downloadable content. There are a lot of things in the standard about directionality and navigation, tables and backlinks and things like that, where I'm on page 42 and it says click here to see the table. It takes me to the table, but the table doesn't know where I came from, so it can't take me back, things like that. So it's an enhancement, and even the W3C is on this journey. They're learning, we're on several of those working groups and different study groups and things like that. We're actively involved in the standards community worldwide. And even the governing body of the standard is learning what people understand, don't understand, and here's some best practices things. So that's an integral part. So those are the big things: downloadable titles and navigation and the handling of links and backlinks, things such as that.
Okay, we have another question here. You made the suggestion regarding alt text for the author to provide preliminary what, why text for each submitted image. What do you consider to be the best process for turning the preliminary info into truly accessible alt text by the publisher converter?
So the conversion workflow should allow the ability in the EPUB format, absolutely allows the ability to just basically embed that alt text into the EPUB file. So the answers are as wide and varied as there are publishing and conversion platforms. So it's not something which I can just respond specifically and directly to. But the idea here is, if you're creating your work, if you have a publishing platform that you're using internally, then you attach the alt text to the image. If a conversion vendor is doing it for you, they have their own platforms and processes to do it. The important part is that the what is this and why is it here, that text language, I say, travels with the image.
Okay. We have a couple people talking about PDFs here, and they seem to have a lot of content in PDF. What can be done in PDF at best versus converting to EPUB or XHTML?
Right. So PDF goes into that plant the flag story. So anything you're going to do in PDF is going to be a remediation. You've already created it, you've already paid to create it, and now you're going to have to go back and open it back up natively and do whatever you can to make it better. It's not possible to make a PDF fully accessible, but it is certainly possible, and S4 Carlisle knows this because you guys do it every day, it is certainly possible to make the file more accessible. That's the first part. There are more and more tools coming out there. For instance, the DAISY Consortium publishes a tool called Word to EPUB. So if you have access to the file in Word before it became a PDF, you can run that Word file through this converter and have an EPUB file out of that, which will still need some nipping and tucking. It's not a miracle worker, but it does the content conversion from Word. So a lot of PDFs are the end result of a Word source file. So if you have the Word source file, you can run the Word to EPUB convert, EPUB, I don't know what that is, the EPUB, Word to EPUB converter, and then at least you have an EPUB on the output there, and you can work with that to enhance it accessibility.
Okay, will the slide presentation be available for people to download afterwards?
That's entirely up to S4. You guys have
Okay.
a copy of it, so yeah.
Yes, we'll make it available for everybody. We'll send out a link for everyone to be able to access this slide presentation. Oh, I wanted to say something. Coming from a background of being a professor for the last 25 years and being involved in a lawsuit, at least one of the districts that I was working for, the Los Angeles Community College District, being involved in a major lawsuit about accessibility because of their software. In this case, it was mathematics software. I think it's important just to reiterate that there are severe, you touched on it a little bit, but that there are severe legal consequences if it's found that the information, especially in academia, is not accessible to all students. Have you found that to be the case all around?
Yeah, I found that to be the case all around because as I tried to explain in the core part of the presentation, this is an on-off switch. Either the software you're offering your students or the content you're offering the students is fully accessible or it is not. There is no intermediate state. There is no gray state. It either is or it isn't. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been doing this a long time and I've never heard of a single institution, whether it's a state or a county or a college or a business, which had action brought against it on lack of accessible content that didn't lose. The federal government has zero tolerance on this issue. I'm not speaking on behalf of the federal government. It's just my experience in seeing these things. And everybody, and it's not just Los Angeles Community College. Harvard lost, MIT lost, massive institutions with enormous legal staffs lose because you either are accessible or you are not. And these laws have been on the books for a long, long time. And Epub Epub came out of the original open ebook forum back 20 something years ago. But Epub embraced accessibility as a concept and just built it all in so that nobody needs to go build an accessibility format. We just put accessibility into the Epub format. So you're not going to win. There's no excuse for not doing it, or at least putting an effort forward. And plant your flag and get started. Basically, whoever you are, if you're a publisher, whether you're publishing journals or mystery novels or college textbooks, or you're an aggregator, a distributor, or an organization, whatever you are, the important thing is to get started because you're going to learn as you go and you're going to connect to other people who are doing this. And we have regular meetings, birds of a feather type meetings. And there's a whole community that wants to help you and learn from you too, because whoever you are, you're going to be doing something that we hadn't considered.
Okay. Do I have any other questions from anybody? All right, to get back to the point about the slides, we will send a link to the slides to every one of the participants. Currently, there will also be a link available on the S4 Carlisle website. If that's it, thank you very much, Michael, for your time. We really appreciate it. And that's it.
Okay, I want to thank you for the opportunity. And I can't stress heavily enough that anybody who's listening should feel absolutely free to reach out to me directly with any question. I'm not saying I can have an answer, but I promise I can't answer your question if you don't ask it. So please ask, please let me help you.
The same goes for me. You can reach out to me at charles@s4carlisle.com. I'll be happy to answer any question, what we can provide for you and what we can do. So if there's anything else, just let me know or let Michael know. Thank you.
Sir, unmute button, sir. Please do unmute.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Michael, for the wonderful presentation. I really hope that all participants are, benefited out of this, and we will continue to support publishers in getting their content as accessible as it is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanda.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.